I landed on Christmas Day at 2:47 p.m., carrying 6 gift bags and a lifetime of expectations. My daughter told me, "Wait for me at the airport, Dad. I'll be there soon to pick you up." I waited for over 12 hours. I called her 35 times. No one came. The terminal was full of families reuniting. Grandparents lifted into hugs. Children screamed with joy. Couples kissed beneath cheap plastic mistletoe. Every few minutes the automatic doors opened and closed, letting in cold air and hope at the same time. Each time I looked up. Each time it wasn't her. At first I told myself not to worry. It was Christmas. Traffic was bad. Kids got sick. Life happened. That's what fathers do, explain away disappointment before it has a chance to hurt. I arranged the gift bags neatly at my feet like colorful soldiers standing guard. Inside them were carefully chosen presents. In my coat pocket were 3 sealed envelopes, certified checks, $175,000 in total. Money I planned to give freely, proudly, without conditions. By hour 4, the excitement had drained out of me. By hour 6, the airport coffee tasted like cardboard. By hour 8, the benches felt like stone. Still, I waited. I didn't want to be the needy father. I didn't want to call too much. I didn't want to be a burden. When I finally reached her again around 8 p.m., her voice was sharp and impatient. "Just wait 15 more minutes, Dad, and don't call a taxi." Then she hung up. That was the moment something inside me shifted. Not anger, not yet. Just a quiet awareness that I was being managed, not loved. 15 minutes came and went. Then 30. Then an hour. My phone stayed silent. 35 unanswered calls don't happen by accident. At 9:27 p.m., I took a taxi to her house. Through the living room window, I saw everything I needed to see. A full dinner table, wine glasses half empty, laughter, comfort. My daughter sitting easily in her chair, relaxed, smiling, not worried at all. No place set for me, no concern, no urgency. I stood outside in the cold with gift bags cutting into my fingers, watching my own family celebrate Christmas without me. That was the slap of reality. I hadn't been forgotten. I had been excluded. And in that quiet moment on the sidewalk, something very clear settled in my chest. I was done begging for space in a life I had fully funded. I was done confusing generosity with love. I was done being patient. They thought Christmas would cost me dignity. They were wrong. Christmas was going to cost them everything they felt entitled to. I didn't become the man I am overnight. My life wasn't built on luck or inheritance. It was built on long days, short nights, and choices that always put my daughter first. 30 years ago, I opened my first auto part shop with a $5,000 loan and a rented garage that smelled like oil and rust. I worked 16 hours a day, 6 days a week, some weeks 7. When other men went home for dinner, I stayed late, balancing invoices. When others took vacations, I reinvested every spare dollar back into inventory. Victoria was 6 when the business finally stabilized. I remember coming home late one night to find her asleep at the kitchen table, her homework unfinished, her head resting on her arms. Margaret had left a note on the counter. "She waited up for you." I carried my daughter to bed that night, promising myself she would never feel the limits I grew up with. Promises like that are expensive. Private school tuition came first, then tutors, then summer programs. By the time Victoria graduated high school, I had spent over $80,000 making sure she had every advantage I never did. When she got accepted into college, I didn't blink. 6 years later, between tuition, housing, sorority fees, and a study abroad semester in Italy, the total crossed $200,000. $200,000! I never once asked her to pay me back, never once reminded her where it came from. Fathers aren't supposed to keep score. At least, that's what I told myself. When she moved out, I covered the down payment on her first apartment. $20,000, wired quietly, no ceremony. When her car broke down during her junior year, I replaced it with a BMW because safety mattered more than appearances. When credit card bills stacked up, I cleared them before she ever saw a late notice. Margaret worried. She said I was teaching Victoria that money appeared when she wanted it. I argued that I was teaching security, stability, love. After Margaret died, the business became both my refuge and my burden. I poured myself into it because grief doesn't follow you into spreadsheets. When Victoria married Martin, I paid for the wedding without hesitation. Not to show off, but because that's what fathers do. We show up. We provide. We absorb the cost quietly. When I sold the business for $2.8 million, I did it because walking through those shops without Margaret became unbearable. That money was supposed to mean freedom. Instead, it became fuel for expectations I didn't realize had hardened into entitlement. Every Christmas, every birthday, every milestone came with my checkbook open and my mouth shut. Gratitude became optional. Presents became transactional. I didn't notice when the calls stopped being about life and started being about logistics. I thought love was proven by how much I gave. I was wrong. I had built my daughter a life so comfortable that she forgot who built it. The change didn't happen all at once. That's what made it dangerous. Betrayal rarely arrives with sirens. It slips in quietly, disguised as growth, independence, modern life. At first, it was small things. Victoria stopped calling on Sundays. Then she started canceling visits at the last minute. "Busy week," she would say. "You know how work is." I did know. I had built a life around being busy. I told myself this was normal. Children grow up. Parents step back. Then the tone changed. She started correcting me in front of others, interrupting my stories, rolling her eyes when I talked about the business. Once, at dinner with her in-laws, she laughed and said, "Dad still thinks working 16-hour days is something to brag about." Everyone chuckled politely. I smiled and let it go, pretending I hadn't felt the sting. The calls became shorter, more transactional. "Can you look over this bill? Can you transfer the money today? Can you help us cover this unexpected expense?" Never. "How are you feeling, Dad?" Never. "Do you want to come stay with us?" Never. "We miss you." I noticed she only called when she needed something, but I ignored the pattern. Love makes men generous and blind at the same time. I told myself I was being supportive, that this was what modern fatherhood looked like. Then came the embarrassment. Victoria began dressing differently when I visited, more formal, more distant. She corrected my grammar, lowered her voice when I spoke too loudly. Once she gently pulled me aside and said, "Dad, maybe don't talk about the shop tonight. My in-laws are very refined." Refined. As if 30 years of honest work had somehow made me unpresentable. I laughed it off. I always laughed it off. Fathers learn to swallow pride because pride doesn't pay college tuition. Pride doesn't buy houses. Pride doesn't keep peace. But something else was happening beneath the surface. I was being minimized, not openly rejected, quietly reduced. The man who had funded her life had become an inconvenience in it. When I sent her messages, responses came hours later, sometimes not at all. When I visited, conversations felt rehearsed, shallow, like she was checking boxes instead of spending time. She never asked about my plans, never asked what I wanted. I wasn't a father anymore. I was an obligation. And still, I kept giving, because I believed sacrifice earned loyalty, because I believed consistency mattered, because I believed family was permanent, even when respect faded. I didn't know yet that the slow erosion of respect is the clearest warning sign of betrayal. I was still trying to save something that no longer existed. By the 7th hour, I stopped pretending this was a misunderstanding. The airport had changed. The cheerful chaos of Christmas arrivals thinned into something quieter, lonelier. Shops closed their metal shutters. Chairs were stacked. The people left were travelers with nowhere to go or nowhere to be wanted. I fit right in. I called Victoria again, straight to voicemail. I left a message that time. Calm. Controlled. It's Dad. I'm still here. Please call me back. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I still believed a decent explanation existed. Fathers hold on to hope longer than they should. When I finally took the taxi, it wasn't anger that drove me. It was exhaustion, the kind that settles into your bones and makes clarity unavoidable. The ride through Denver was quiet. Christmas lights glowed in windows as we passed neighborhoods full of warmth and belonging. I watched families through glass panes, gathered around tables, laughing, leaning into one another. Each house felt like a reminder of what I thought I was traveling toward. When the taxi pulled into my daughter's driveway, I knew before I stepped out. 2 cars, both parked neatly, both working. Lights on inside, music faintly audible through the walls. No urgency, no chaos. No sign of a family scrambling to retrieve a forgotten father. I stood there for a moment, my breath fogging in the cold, gift bags hanging heavy from my hands. Through the living room window, I saw them clearly. Victoria at the table, Martin beside her, wine glasses raised, conversation flowing easily, no empty chair, no one missing me. I rang the doorbell. Victoria's face when she opened the door told me everything. Surprise first, then panic, then calculation. She lied immediately. Something about a flat tire, about confusion, about timing. But lies collapse under their own weight. Inside, the table was already cleared, dinner finished, Christmas done. I sat there listening as explanations changed mid-sentence, each one weaker than the last. Then I excused myself and walked down the hall. That was when I heard the truth, not shouted, not whispered in guilt, spoken casually, comfortably, as if it were obvious. "I really wish he hadn't shown up tonight," Martin said. "He embarrasses us," Victoria replied. "He doesn't know how to act around people like my parents." They laughed. They talked about my life's work as if it were a joke. They talked about excluding me from future holidays. Then Victoria said it, the sentence that snapped something permanent inside me. "At least once the inheritance comes through, we won't have to pretend anymore." I stood there in the hallway, invisible, listening to my daughter plan her life after my usefulness ended. That was the moment everything broke. Not my heart. That had already endured enough. My illusion. I realized I had not raised a daughter who loved me. I had raised someone who tolerated me as long as I funded her comfort. The betrayal wasn't leaving me at the airport. It was revealing that she never planned to come. I didn't confront them immediately. That surprised even me. I stood there in the hallway for several seconds after their voices faded, letting the truth settle into place. Not rage, not grief, just clarity. The kind that doesn't shout. The kind that locks into position and refuses to move. When I walked back into the living room, I wasn't shaking. I wasn't emotional. I was finished. Victoria tried to talk. Martin avoided my eyes. Her in-laws looked confused, sensing something had shifted, but not yet understanding what. I didn't explain myself. I didn't argue. I didn't ask for apologies. I gathered my coat and left. That night, I checked into a hotel downtown. Alone. Quiet. No guilt. No second guessing. At 6:30 the next morning, while the city was still asleep, I called the only person who had ever handled my finances without emotion. My attorney. He had helped structure my business sale. He had drafted my will years earlier. He understood numbers, law, and consequences. When he answered, I said only one thing. I need to revise everything. He didn't ask why. We met that afternoon. I laid out the facts, not my feelings. The airport, the lies, the conversation I overheard, the inheritance comment. He listened without interruption, then opened my file and turned the page with deliberate calm. "Do you want to remove her entirely?" he asked. Yes. No hesitation. No drama. We discussed options. Trust restructuring, immediate financial cutoff, estate redirection, educational funds protected but reassigned, charitable foundations, personal use. By the time I left his office, the decision was no longer emotional. It was procedural. That night I sat alone in my hotel room and did something I hadn't done in years. I planned my own future. Not around holidays, not around visits, not around being tolerated, around myself. The next morning I booked an extended stay, then another. I contacted a travel consultant. Europe in the spring. Quiet places. Places where no one knew me as an inconvenience or a wallet. The irony wasn't lost on me. The money my daughter felt entitled to was now funding the freedom she had pushed me toward. I didn't feel victorious. I felt balanced. Justice doesn't always feel loud. Sometimes it feels like silence finally working in your favor. I didn't announce my decisions. That was the mistake I had made my entire life. Explaining myself, justifying my choices, hoping understanding would soften entitlement. This time, I did none of that. I let silence do the work. Within 48 hours, the changes were in motion. Accounts were reorganized. Automatic transfers stopped. The education fund was placed into a protected structure that required my direct approval. My will was rewritten with surgical precision. No drama, no loopholes, no room for interpretation. Victoria didn't know any of this yet. She sent messages. Short ones at first. "Dad, can we talk? I know things got emotional. Let's not make this bigger than it needs to be." I didn't reply. Then came the calls. Not frantic, not desperate, confident. She still believed this was temporary, a mood, a father sulking until guilt did its work. She had no idea the floor had already been removed beneath her.
I went about my days calmly. Breakfast at the hotel, long walks through downtown streets, conversations with strangers who didn't know my history and didn't expect anything from me. For the first time in decades, my time belonged entirely to me. That's when I understood something important. Entitled people don't fear anger. They fear boundaries, and I had finally drawn one. The real trap wasn't the money. It was time. I gave her enough of it to reveal her true priorities. She didn't ask how I was sleeping. She didn't ask where I was staying. She didn't ask if I was safe. She only asked when we would resolve this. Resolve what? The illusion that she could disrespect me and still collect the benefits. A week passed. Then two. When the first bill bounced, she noticed. When the automatic payment failed, Martin noticed. When the account access changed, panic finally entered the conversation. The messages changed tone.
Dad, something's wrong. We can't access the funds. Please call me. This isn't funny. I still didn't respond, because the trap wasn't meant to humiliate her. It was meant to teach her exactly how much of her life rested on a man she believed she had outgrown, and the lesson had only just begun. Victoria didn't panic right away. That was the most revealing part. For days after the accounts changed, she behaved as if this were a temporary inconvenience, a technical issue, a misunderstanding that would resolve itself once I cooled down. Entitlement creates confidence without foundation. She left messages that assumed forgiveness was automatic. You'll understand once you calm down. We're family. This will pass. You've always taken care of things. That last one stayed with me. Taken care of things. Not loved, not respected, managed. Martin's messages were different, shorter, tighter, focused on logistics. He wanted timelines, explanations, reassurance. The tone of a man who believed money was a system, not a relationship. They still hosted dinners, still posted photos, smiling faces, perfect captions. The illusion remained intact. From the outside, nothing had changed. From the inside, they were bleeding quietly. That's the danger of arrogance. It delays awareness. Victoria believed time was on her side. She believed history guaranteed outcomes. She believed being my daughter meant permanence without effort. She forgot one thing. I built my entire life understanding systems, leverage, and consequences. I didn't survive 30 years in business by reacting emotionally. I survived by observing patterns and cutting losses when necessary. She had mistaken patience for weakness. She talked about me the way people talk about old furniture. Useful, paid for, expected to remain where it was placed. When she finally called and demanded an explanation, I answered calmly, "I'm unavailable." That was it. No argument, no justification. Her shock was immediate. Not sadness, not guilt, shock. Because for the first time in her life, access had been revoked. The truth was setting in now, slowly, painfully. She hadn't inherited security. She had borrowed it, and the lender had closed the account. The collapse didn't start with shouting. It started with numbers. One missed payment became two. A declined transfer became a locked screen. What Victoria once considered a minor inconvenience turned into a pattern she couldn't ignore. Rent, insurance, credit cards. All the invisible systems I had quietly supported began to fail at once. That's when the desperation crept in. She showed up unannounced at my hotel. I was having breakfast, reading the paper, enjoying the unfamiliar peace of not being needed. The waiter hesitated before approaching me. "Sir, there's a woman in the lobby asking for you. She says it's urgent." I didn't need to ask who. Victoria walked toward me like someone stepping onto unstable ground. Her confidence was gone, her posture smaller, her voice tight. "Dad, this has gone far enough." I folded the paper calmly. "Sit down." She didn't. "We can't access the accounts. Martin's cards are declining. Something is seriously wrong." "Yes," I said, "it is." She stared at me, waiting for the familiar rhythm, the explanation, the reassurance, the rescue. None came. "You don't understand what you're doing," she said. "You're punishing us." "No," I replied evenly. "I'm correcting a mistake." Her face hardened. "This is about Christmas? About that misunderstanding?" "There was no misunderstanding," I said. "You told me exactly who I was to you. I simply believed you." That was when I reached into my coat and placed the envelopes on the table. Not dramatically, not forcefully, just enough for her to see the bank seals. "This," I continued, "was your Christmas gift. $50,000. Another 50 for Martin. 75 for your daughter's education." Her breath caught. "And this," I said, slipping them back into my coat, "is what entitlement costs." She finally sat down. "You can't do this," she whispered. "That money was promised." "No," I said, "it was planned. There's a difference." Tears formed, but they didn't move me. I had already cried my share in places she never saw. "The will has been changed," I added, "effective immediately." The words landed with weight. "You're cutting me off," she said. "I'm releasing myself," I corrected. For the first time in her life, there was nothing she could negotiate. The hammer had fallen. Regret doesn't arrive with dignity. It comes late, loud, and desperate. Victoria's composure lasted less than a week. After our meeting at the hotel, the calls became frantic. Not polite, not careful, panicked. She left voicemails at all hours, her voice cracking, repeating the same phrases like prayers she hoped might suddenly work. "Dad, please, we made a mistake. I didn't mean it. You can't do this to your own daughter." That last line said everything. She still believed blood outweighed behavior. Martin's approach was colder, legal. He sent emails asking about documentation, claiming misunderstandings, hinting at reconciliation if things could be reset. He spoke the language of damage control, not remorse. Neither of them asked how I was. Neither of them apologized for the airport. Neither of them mentioned the things I overheard. They only reacted to loss. That's when I knew this wasn't regret. It was withdrawal. When the credit cards were officially canceled, panic turned to blame. Victoria accused Martin of mismanaging finances. Martin accused her of provoking me. Each tried to push responsibility away from themselves like a contaminated object. I listened to none of it. We met one final time at my attorney's office. Neutral ground. Witnesses present. Papers prepared. Victoria cried openly this time. Real tears. Uncontrolled. The kind meant to erase consequences. "I didn't know it would go this far," she said. "I thought you'd cool off." "I did," I replied. "That's why this is permanent." Martin stayed silent, jaw tight, eyes calculating exits. The attorney slid the documents across the table. Trust modifications, asset reallocations, a clear statement of intent. "This is irreversible," he said calmly. Victoria looked at me as if she were seeing a stranger. "You're really doing this?" "Yes." The room fell quiet. There was nothing left to argue. No leverage, no bargaining chips. The inheritance she had already spent in her mind was gone. The safety net she assumed existed had been folded and removed without drama. She left that office smaller than she entered it, and I felt nothing but relief, because the collapse wasn't cruel, it was honest. Peace arrived quietly, not as celebration, not as triumph, as space. For the first time in decades, my calendar was empty. No obligations disguised as love. No holidays planned around tension. No silent expectation that my presence came with a price tag attached. I stayed at the hotel longer than I planned. I liked waking up without checking my phone. I liked ordering breakfast without wondering who might need something from me before noon. I liked being invisible in a city that owed me nothing. Then I left. Europe wasn't an escape. It was a return. I walked through old streets where no one knew my past or measured my worth by what I provided. I sat in quiet cafes and talked to strangers who listened because they wanted to, not because they needed me. I told stories about my business to people who respected work, not status. I visited places Margaret and I had once talked about but never had time for. I carried her memory without carrying anyone else's entitlement. The money stayed with me, not hoarded, directed. I funded scholarships for trade schools, kids who reminded me of myself, kids who understood that dignity comes from effort, not inheritance. I donated anonymously. No plaques, no recognition. Legacy doesn't need applause. Victoria tried to reach me again months later, a message about missing me, about understanding now, about wanting to rebuild. I didn't respond, not out of anger, out of clarity. Some bridges aren't meant to be repaired. They're meant to be remembered as boundaries. I didn't disown my daughter. She disowned the values that raised her. All I did was stop financing the betrayal. The hardest lesson I learned came late, but it came clean. Kindness without boundaries is weakness, and love that demands self-erasure isn't love at all. I am not lonely. I am free.